Do you need practical advice on how to overcome the dark night of the soul? Are you looking for tips and techniques that work? I'm Sophia, and in this video I'm going to give you some concrete protocols you can use to get through the dark night of the soul. In fact, I'm going to show you how to get through both types of dark night of the soul, because there's two types and they each need a different approach. I've got a video which explains both types of dark night in detail and how to know which one you're going through. So I'll link you to it in the description in case you want to watch that first. But just in brief, the first type of dark night of the soul is growth oriented, and it happens before our conscious spiritual awakening. We can go through many types of these dark nights as we untangle our human trauma and self-limiting patterns of behavior. Basically, the universe makes things unbearable for us so that we take steps towards positive change. And this then builds the stable emotional and mental platform that we need for our future conscious awakening. The second type of dark night of the soul is spiritual, and it happens much later on in the awakening journey once we're aware that we're going through the spiritual awakening process. It comes after the wild and crazy connection stage, during which we're intensely connected to the universe, and it manifests as a total shutdown of communication. We go from having an enormous amount of psychic input to absolutely nothing at all. We lose all access to our guides, we lose access to the universe, and we feel disconnected, lonely, and lost. I'm going to talk about how to overcome the growth-oriented dark night of the soul first in this video. So if you're in a spiritual dark night of the soul, please feel free to skip ahead to the second half. I should also say that I've written a book about how to get through the dark night of the soul, which has a lot more guidance in it than I can give you in just one video. So I'll link you to that as well. So, how to overcome the dark night of the soul, the growth-oriented kind. There's two strands of activity that we need to consider. The first is we need to manage our symptoms so that we can create a positive mindset, and then we're more able to take action, because you know how difficult it is to do anything if we feel depressed. The second thing is that we need to take action to solve the underlying cause of the dark night we're going through, because the dark night of the soul in this case is just a symptom of something that needs to change. So let's talk about managing the symptoms first. I'm going to point you in a few directions and I'm going to teach you some techniques. How to overcome the dark night of the soul. Technique 1, practice grounding. You probably already know this, but it is one of the quickest ways to talk your mind off a ledge. Spending time in water, spending time in nature are natural grounding activities. So try to find the energy to do those if you can. But you should also use specific grounding exercises. And I'm going to show you one really simple technique. But of course, there's also loads of guided meditations you can find on YouTube if you prefer. Okay, so here's the technique. If you live somewhere with a garden, you can do this standing outdoors in bare feet if it's not too cold, or otherwise just sit in a chair as I'm doing now with your back straight and your bare feet planted on the floor. All you need to do is just close your eyes and visualize roots growing from the soles of your feet deep down into the center of the earth. Then when you've got that image in your mind, you just repeat the affirmation 3 times. I am safe, secure, and in control of my emotions. You can use this exercise anytime you feel anxious, but it's also really good to use it every morning as a discipline, because that's just going to set a bit of a foundation for your day. Now, by the way, if you're feeling particularly scattered, then a hot shower is a really quick way to ground. And if you can follow it with a cup of sweet tea, that's even better, because sugar also helps you to ground. How to get through the dark night of the soul. Technique number 2, use crystals. Dark crystals absorb negative energy, so using them will help you to raise your vibrations and move towards a more positive mindset. Black obsidian, onyx, black tourmaline, these are all good choices. And there's several ways you can use them. You can buy larger crystals and place them in your environment. You can wear them as jewelry. Or you can place them on your body while you're lying down. Around the heart or the solar plexus is ideal. Just combine this with a nothingness meditation. Take some time out, lie down, let your mind empty. Technique number 3, use sound therapy. Sound therapy just means playing tones or music which resonate with and raise your energies. So again, it's about creating a positive mindset. You can combine sound therapy with a nothingness meditation again, or just lie on the sofa and zone out, which is sort of the same thing. There are plenty of healing sound videos on YouTube. The best thing is just to try a few out and see which ones resonate with you the most. It won't be the same for everyone. It depends entirely upon which chakras need attention. Now, if you want to cover all the bases, or if you're feeling really low, find chakra healing music which targets all 7 chakras. And of course, you can just play music that you find soothing. Technique number 4, microdose psilocybin. Now, I know this is a controversial topic for some people, but the latest research into psychedelic therapies shows they're far more effective than traditional antidepressants. Now, if you live somewhere where psilocybin or magic mushrooms are legal or decriminalized, then microdosing can be a game changer. The point about it is you're microdosing. You're taking tiny amounts every few days, and it's sub-perceptual. In other words, you're not going to trip. You can microdose in the morning and still drive to work. I'm personally a huge advocate of microdosing because I personally used it to cure a 2-year chronic suicidal depression. It took 3 weeks and it succeeded where all other traditional antidepressants had failed. So if you're really struggling to pull yourself out of the slump, and if your depression is at dangerous levels and traditional antidepressants aren't working for you, it's something to consider as long as you're doing it legally and safely. How to overcome the growth-oriented dark night of the soul. Technique number 5, build your self-esteem. Now, often in a dark night or leading up to it, we lose a lot of self-belief, and sometimes we lose our sense of self. This isn't related to ego death, by the way, as some people say. That's actually a parallel process which happens later in the awakening journey. It's more of a symptom of an imbalance in the solar plexus chakra. So there's a really simple exercise you can use to build your self-belief. Just take a piece of paper and divide it into 3 columns. In column 1, you want to write the heading, Good Things About Me. In column 2, you want to write the heading, Everything I've Achieved. And in column 3, you're going to write the heading, People Who Have My Back. Then you're just going to take your time, fill out the columns, everything you can think of under those 3 headings. For example, in column 1, you might write, I'm kind, I'm funny, I'm clever. And in column 2, this can be things you've achieved at work or in a sport, for example. In terms of column 3, there's 2 reasons for making a list of people who have your back. And I guarantee you've got at least 1 or 2 people who absolutely have your back. Firstly, it reminds you that you're not alone in this. There are people there who want to help you. And secondly, it should help you see that if good people are invested in you, then you should be invested in you too. Once you've written your list, I promise you're going to see there's loads that you can be proud of. Just want to keep that paper somewhere you can find it easily, and then when you need reminding that you're worth investing in, read it. Overcoming the dark night of the soul, technique number 6, practice gratitudes. I use a guided meditation for this. There's a fantastic one on YouTube that I'll link you to in the description. Gratitudes remind us that we have things to be thankful for, even when we're in a dark night of the soul. And practicing them regularly helps raise our vibration. That's what we're trying to do with all of these exercises. As I said, we're trying to raise our vibrations and move into a more positive mindset. Okay, so that's a few techniques that are going to help you do that. But now let's talk about how to tackle the root cause of the dark night of the soul. And this is a lot more difficult than managing the symptoms, but it's entirely necessary, because if you don't do this, you're just going to keep falling back into these periods of depression. So there's a couple of aspects to this. First of all, 1, we need to understand the problem. Then 2, we need to work out how we're going to solve the problem. To understand what caused you to enter this dark night of the soul. And typically this is going to be 1 or a combination of 3 things. 1, you've ended up in a situation which makes you unhappy. 2, someone has done something to harm you. Or 3, your own behaviours are impacting negatively on your life. To show you some exercises to help you work out what the problems are if you don't already know. First of all, I want you to retrace your steps. Can you pinpoint the time that this dark night of the soul descended, or when you first became aware of it? What led you to this place? Now, the Socratic method of questioning is really helpful here. All that means is you just keep asking questions until you arrive at the truth. So, for example, you might think, the start of all of this was when my relationship ended. But why did the relationship end? It ended because my partner cheated on me. But why did my partner cheat on me? He cheated on me because our relationship had become stale and we didn't talk about it. Why didn't we talk about it? Because I'm afraid of difficult conversations. So you can see that there, in that example, you've uncovered a fundamental self-limiting behaviour, which now you know you need to work on. Another good way of understanding the things that are making you unhappy are establishing what I call your absolute truths. These are things that are fundamental to you and necessary for you to live a happy and contented life. So to give you some examples, some of my fundamental truths are a life without painting for me is no life at all. And I need to live in a place where I feel connected to nature. Once you've identified your own fundamental truths, then you can compare them to your life as it is today, and that will help you to see where things need to change. The final way I'm going to show you, which will help you to uncover the root causes of your growth-oriented dark night of the soul, is a difficult one, but it's hugely beneficial. Now, you should only do this once you've worked on creating a positive mindset. In this exercise, you need to examine the times you've behaved in a way you're ashamed of. Again, try to do this objectively. By the way, shame is a human emotion which serves absolutely no purpose at all at soul level. It's societal conditioning. So it's really important to view yourself with compassion during this exercise. What you're trying to do is to understand where your patterns of destructive behaviour are coming from. 9 times out of 10, they've come from childhood conditioning or they're a reaction to past trauma. Now again, you can also use the Socratic method of questioning to drill down to the root causes while you're doing this exercise. During this process, it's so important to forgive yourself. Understand, none of us are born bad. All that's happened is you've fallen into some unhealthy patterns. And I guarantee you, there are plenty of people out there who've behaved worse than you. So the objective here is to write a short list of behaviours that you've identified in yourself that you'd like to change. Once you have all of these inputs, then you have a view of what needs to change for you to overcome your growth-oriented dark night of the soul. So now you have all these inputs. The next step is to research the solutions, to make a plan and to execute it. I'm not going to go into detail of how to do that here because there's hundreds of options and everyone's needs are unique. But if you delve into the psychology of your behavior online or by reading books, then the solutions are going to present themselves. In fact, your guides are going to make sure that the solutions present themselves. And of course, then you're going to need to do the work, inner work, shadow work, whatever you want to call it. A therapist or a coach can be really helpful at this point. Don't worry about the cost, spend what you can afford, and I promise you it will be the best money you ever spent. It's really difficult to put a time limit on overcoming a growth-oriented dark night of the soul because it really depends on how much work you need to do and how long you take to do it. The key is to be patient and to be kind to yourself because this stuff is difficult. It took me personally 7 years to resolve my issues, and I had many episodes of the growth-oriented dark night of the soul prior to that. But it's never too late to start, and the benefits are life-changing. Just imagine if you didn't have to go through every day carrying the mental load of self-limiting thoughts and behaviours. Just imagine what your life could be like. Now I'm going to talk about how to overcome the spiritual dark night of the soul. This is a very different kettle of fish because it's not in our control in the same way. It's hardwired into the spiritual awakening process, and every awakener will go through it at some point. The spiritual dark night of the soul arrives at 50% integration with our higher self, and it ends at 65 to 70% integration. So the main focus throughout this type of dark night of the soul should be on continuing to integrate, and that means meditate. Meditation is by far the most effective way to integrate with your higher self, and that's the only way that you're going to get through the spiritual dark night of the soul. So meditate every day as much as you can. It really doesn't matter what technique you use, just that you're focusing the conscious mind. Now, if you meditated prior to the dark night of the soul, be aware that the experience is going to be very different. You're not going to feel a connection, but don't worry about it. It's normal. Just keep going through the motions. You can also use generally meditative activities to speed up your integration. Walking in nature, long distance running, swimming, these are all really beneficial. But the one that makes the most difference is any kind of artistic or creative pursuit. Ideally something you can do for at least a couple of hours at a time and which absorbs you completely, like painting or drawing. Now, of course, one of the difficulties during the spiritual dark night of the soul is that we feel completely wretched and we have little motivation or energy to do anything at all. So let's look at how we're going to deal with that. Here, detachment is the skill that you need. You can use detachment techniques to rise above your feelings and keep moving forward. You can just think of it as going through the motions or faking it until you make it. One really simple way to detach is to learn how to put your mind in neutral. And actually, if you're in the spiritual dark night of the soul, you should already be able to do this because by now you should have switched off your internal monologue much earlier in the journey. All you need to do is just empty your mind. You're looking for that space where no thoughts are coming through at all. Then just move your body in whatever direction it needs to go. Don't even think about it, just do it. If you need to go for a walk, just get up and head out the door. If you need to paint, pick up a brush. If you need to meditate, go and lie down on the bed and close your eyes. Once you get started, you'll find it's relatively easy to continue. It's getting started that's difficult. Now let's talk about how to lift your mood during the dark night of the soul. It's a bit tricky during the spiritual dark night because the flow of energy through your chakras has been reduced to a very low level, so you can only rise up so far. You're not going to feel euphorically happy, let's put it that way. But you can definitely lighten things up a bit. I'm going to give you 3 practical tips which show you how to do that. Tip number 1, adjust your mindset. Try to see the spiritual dark night of the soul as a positive thing. For a start, it means you're at least 50% integrated with your higher self, so congratulations. Also, it's showing you that you can do anything entirely on your own, because if you can get through the spiritual dark night of the soul, I promise you, you can get through anything. In addition, try to remember that your guides dislike the spiritual dark night of the soul just as much as you do. They are still there in the background, willing you to get through it. That's because they want to feel the connection again. So gritting your teeth and pushing through means you're helping your entire team, not just yourself. Finally, tell yourself nothing will ever be this bad again. It's by far and away the worst part of the spiritual awakening journey, but it is temporary. You can and you will get through the dark night of the soul. And of course, once you're on the other side, that's where the magic starts to happen. Tip number 2, to lift your mood, perform gratitudes. I mentioned this in the growth-oriented dark night of the soul as well. You're not going to feel grateful, that's pretty much a given, but using gratitude, affirmations and guided meditations is going to lift your mood, even if you're just saying the words without feeling them. As I mentioned, I'm going to leave a link to a really good guided meditation in the description, so look it up. And I promise you, using gratitudes every day will lift your mood. Tip number 3, use affirmations. Now, as I mentioned in the previous section, you can use affirmations for gratitude as well as guided meditation. For example, I used to say through gritted teeth, thank you for my lessons, and also thank you for allowing me to be part of this amazing journey. But you can also use affirmations more generally to help you get through the dark night of the soul. So this is statements like, I will get through the dark night of the soul. There is no plan B. I will complete this stage of awakening. Or you could say something like, I am strong, I am patient, I know the dark night will take time, but I'm committed to and I embrace the journey. Now, it won't speed up the integration process, but what it will do is it will help strengthen your resolve. The final thing I want to emphasize when you're trying to get through the spiritual dark night of the soul is that you need to rest, and you need to rest a lot. You only have so much energy to expend because your chakras have been restricted. So you're naturally going to feel very tired. Just take time out. Don't feel guilty about it. It's entirely necessary. Even if you're used to being an active person, understand that we're supposed to slow down during the spiritual dark night of the soul. Sleep is absolutely essential, as much as you feel you need. Not just because it's going to recharge you a little bit, but because your team are upgrading your system in the background and they need you to go offline so they can work. So that's a few tips on how to overcome the dark night of the soul, both kinds. I provide many more protocols in my book, How to Get Through the Dark Night of the Soul. There's 40 in there, in fact. So if you'd like deeper guidance, you can find it on Amazon. I've made it available on Kindle Unlimited, so hopefully it should be affordable for everyone. Meanwhile, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification to receive regular videos on how to navigate the spiritual awakening journey.